Just one question, Madam Chair, Madam Secretary. And maybe I'm being simplistic in trying to unravel or to understand a little further about the challenges that are before us as far as Pakistan and Afghanistan is concerned. There are 12 million Pashtuns living in Afghanistan, a couple of million Uzbeks, a couple of million Tajiks. Seems to me that there's really no such thing as an Afghan because there are so many different tribes that make up the country in Afghanistan. And right on the borderline of Pakistan, there are 27 million Pashtuns. And within that confines, we end up with some 27,000 Talibans that we're going after, hopefully, and trying to get them to straighten out in their ways, and hopefully by the current process of trying to negotiate with them. And we've got 100,000 troops right now in Afghanistan, I guess with the purpose of going after the 27,000 Talibans, and costing us about $120 billion a year. Are we still committed to 2014, Madam Secretary, for withdrawal from Afghanistan, given the tremendous amount of resources and problems that we're faced with in dealing with this?
Yes, Congressman, that is the commitment, and it's a mutually agreed upon commitment by NATO ISAF and the Afghan government, and of course the United States. So that is our commitment. And as you know, we have begun to transition security responsibility to the Afghan forces in a number of areas. There will be more announced shortly by the Afghan government. And we have a plan that our military leadership is implementing to continue to advise and support as Afghans take the lead, but to move away from any kind of ongoing combat responsibility by American or NATO ISAF troops.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. The second question, like my colleague from our chairwoman, I'm deeply concerned about the recent events that transpired in West Papua in Indonesia, whereby the Indonesian military and police forces have arrested hundreds of unarmed and harmless civilians who apparently had a meeting in Jayapura, the Papuan People's Congress that they met. And among those arrested is a dear friend, a traditional leader by the name of Forkoras Yabui Sembat. This gentleman, Madam Secretary, wouldn't even hurt a fly. He's a traditional leader. Out of sheer frustration of 2.2 million West Papuans have been waiting with the Indonesian government for well over 10 years that it was supposed to be given the special autonomy status. And the Indonesian government hasn't done anything really to pursue and to promote this. And I suspect out of frustration, the West Papuans just simply wanted to declare independence. And for this now, the Indonesian government is accusing Mr. Forkoras of treason. And like I said, this traditional leader, I've met the gentleman. He's an elderly person, a traditional leader, wouldn't even hurt a fly. And I really would really appreciate, Madam Secretary, if the administration would pursue this earnestly with the Indonesian government. I realize always the answer has been this is an internal matter within the province of the Indonesian government, but it does have a lot of serious international implications in terms of the military forces and how the Indonesian government is pursuing this. And I just wanted to ask for your assistance and if we can work together in making sure that this traditional leader and others who have been arrested are properly given their due process of law.
Congressman, we will certainly follow up on that and consult with you about it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Turner is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Secretary. I recently returned from Afghanistan and met with military and state people. There's a contrast between the optimism, at least that the military expressed, in achieving their goal in the next 30 months, which I think minimally is to thwart a base of operations. The State Department seemed less optimistic in establishing a legal system, and a rule of law. And I'd be interested in hearing what you think of this, whether the cultural divide between what we expect from the Afghanis and what is really practical can be closed within at least a reasonable period of time. Certainly 30 months is going to be very difficult. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman, and thank you for going on that trip, because I think it is important, and I hope you agree to see these situations firsthand and meet and talk with people, so we appreciate your trip. I think that the civilian presence in Afghanistan, which has been tripled in the last 2 years in response to what were clear deficiencies of attention in the prior years, has made a lot of progress. But it is a complicated undertaking, and I think that those with whom you spoke were being very candid with you, that it is something that is quite challenging. As I said in the beginning, we've made a lot of progress. We think that progress has made a difference. But you got to remember that Afghans had a lot of experience fighting, but not a lot of experience in putting together what we would consider a modern government, and certainly very little experience in what we are hoping to see them move toward, which is a sustainable democratic government. So the progress is challenging, but it is continuing, and that is why it's important that we negotiate this strategic partnership document so that we have an ongoing relationship. You know, there's no sensible way to compare any two nations because they are each unique, but we do have some experience. You know, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the people living in those totalitarian states had little or no experience, unless they were quite elderly, in what a functioning democratic government even looked like, what a trade union looked like, what kinds of human rights should be respected. And I think it's quite an accomplishment for the people of those countries over the last 20 plus years to have made the progress that they've made. Well, we're starting on a very different level in Afghanistan. There's no real experience. They went from a monarchy that was a very loosely governing presence in much of the country to a succession of first invasion by the Soviet Union and the installation of a puppet regime, to the warlordism, the rise of the Taliban, in part as a reaction against what was not happening that people in the country thought was in their interest. This is a country that has been through so much. And I would add that, yes, even though there are different ethnic groups or different tribal and clan groups, they do consider themselves Afghans. They don't have any doubt in their minds about that. But how they work out the modes of cooperation are still to be determined. So, you know, we are entering this with, I think, the right dose of humility. I think in the beginning, maybe we didn't have enough of that. We didn't know how difficult it would be to make that transition. But we're making progress, and we're going to stay with it. And on the civilian side, we'll be with it after 2014.
Thank you.
Well played, Mr. Turner. The junior man on the totem pole stuck around and got to ask the secretary question. Mr. Berman, the old guy. Recognized.
Young at heart. Madam Secretary, the administration has made it clear that the war in Afghanistan can only end through a political settlement. You've been quite candid that you would not support any agreement that gives up the hard-won rights of the Afghan people. The red lines you've previously mentioned aside, given the Taliban's brutal history and that the movement is so ideologically driven, What makes you think, for example, they would agree to change course on ideology? How do we get them to change the way they see the world?
Well, Congressman, I'm not sure that all of them would, and I'm very realistic about that. We've had somewhere in the order of 2,500 fighters officially reintegrate. In other words, we have registration of them. We know that they've done it. Of those, there seems to be both a weariness with fighting and a recognition that the path that the Taliban had been on was not the right path. So this is part of the testing process that we have to be engaged in, and I think that the hard reality is that until we really put it to them in some kind of Afghan-led negotiations, nobody will be able to gauge that. We have followed some intelligence threads which suggest that there is a debate going on within the Quetta Shura about, for example, letting girls go to school, which is something that would seem to me to be absolutely a condition. So I think you're asking the right question. I'm just not yet at the stage of how this is unfolding to be able to tell you, are our chances, 50-50? Are they 40-60? We just don't know yet, Mr. Berman.
Okay. Well, I understand. I want to get into an issue that's concerned me. It's a sensitive issue, and I had to miss your testimony because of all politics is local, and had to do this issue in the Aviation Subcommittee of Transportation and Infrastructure. But last March, in accordance with Section 203 of the Enhanced Partnership with Pakistan Act, you certified that Pakistan was continuing to cooperate with the United States in efforts to dismantle supplier networks, that it has demonstrated a sustained commitment and is making significant efforts towards combating terrorist groups. Given Admiral Mullen's recent statement, the discovery of bin Laden in Pakistan, recent reports in the Indian press that the mastermind of the Mumbai attacks remains a key player in the affairs of LET, despite being in custody for over 2 years. I'm wondering, do you have any regrets about making that certification? And is there anything on your recent trip or anything else that's gone on in the last few weeks that makes you feel optimistic that the purposes we were trying to achieve in that certification requirement we can move forward on?
Well, Congressman, the certification that I signed with regard to Pakistan's role in combating terrorist groups, as you know, was mandated by legislation from the preceding fiscal year. And at the time I made the certification, I closely considered the requirements set forth in the statute, and I determined that on balance, Pakistan met the legal threshold. Now, one of the challenges is that there are a number of factors here. There was no doubt that Pakistan had entered the fight against terrorists and had made sacrifices for that fight. There was certainly a continuing intelligence cooperation, particularly focused on the al-Qaeda operatives, that was proving to be helpful. And
could I ask you, that the Secretary have an additional minute just to finish the answer to this question?
No, I'm sorry. Nope.
well,
all animals are
I will be
equal.
happy to provide you additional written material about that, Mr. Berman, because I know what a serious question it is, and I have to do this on an annual basis. And I also would point out that in the last 6 months from the operation in Abbottabad, we have had great success in taking out al-Qaeda leadership. And so
Thank
we
you,
have to
Madam
weigh
Chair.
all of these factors.
Mr. Smith is recognized. He's the Subcommittee on Africa and Global Health and Human Rights Chairman.
I thank my distinguished chairman for recognizing me. Welcome, Madam Secretary.
Thank you.
Let me ask a couple of questions. 10 years after the Taliban, not a single public Christian church remains in Afghanistan. As you know, 2 Christian Afghan citizens were almost certainly would have lost their lives had there not been a huge intervention, and we were part of that. You, I know, were